seen them. I believe they're very, very...
Yeah, I'll play a piece whenever
Yeah,
you're
no,
ready.
but I mean, they're very
Yeah, no, they are.
modern. Oh, I'm ready.
You're ready to go
I'm
on
ready.
here, eh? You're ready to go on here.
I'm ready to go on here. Except the one.
What's going on in the community? Let's find out with Isaac Glassman.
Welcome, good evening. It's a chilly evening in Johannesburg this evening, but much warmer than it was the past weekend. So sit back, relax and enjoy. We have a wonderful show this evening. We have in the studio a guest, Les Glassman, I'm sure now a regular who was last year in December. And he's got a lot to tell us tonight this evening. Welcome, Les. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure seeing you again. And tell me, what's news from Israel? What's happening there?
We've got a new president. Ruvi Rivlin was elected today, and he's going to be good. He'll unite the people. I think he's a popular choice, and it's exciting. And Shimon Peres he was a career diplomat, and he brought prestige back to the presidency. But I think Ruvi Rivlin will do very well.
I think so as well. You know, Shimon Peres has served in so many different capacities. You know, he was originally in 1948 when they had the War of Independence. He was already a member of the Haganah. He was very responsible for bringing in arms into Israel from Czechoslovakia. They smuggled it in. And there was a book written by Shimon Peres called David Sling.
That's right.
A wonderful book. You should read it. If the listeners are listening, you all should get hold of that book, David Sling. How they managed to get these arms in from...
It's fascinating. Absolutely
Unbelievable,
fascinating.
yeah. So we'll wait to see what happens with the new president. Les, we start off as usual now. We'll come back to you in a few moments. With
Thanks.
those unfortunately who passed away, you know, we weren't on air last week. It was Shavuot, and I hope all of you enjoyed your blintzes, your cheesecake, your saltanosses. And that's all behind us now, so we're looking forward to the next Chag, which will only be in September. Well, be Rosh Hashanah, but before that we have two fasts. The Shiva also with Tammuz, and then the Tisha B'Av. But before you look around, they'll be gone. Now, we had, unfortunately, those who passed away was Anna Gertrude Furman, Zelda Port, Phyllis Thelma Strine, Minnie Wax, I'll come back to that in a moment, Shirley Levine, Basil Felt, Joe Nach, Abram Joseph Rosenberg, Shlomo Pipritz, Hyman Stein, Pearl Shapiro, Walter Marcus, Bernice Lanterman, and Rola Latinsky. Now, I come back to Minnie Wax. I'm sure many of you will remember the late Dave Wax. He was the Grand Secretary of the HOD. And he passed away about 23 years ago. Minnie was 94, had a long and a good life. And as I said, that Dave was very, very involved. He was also one of the early founders of the B'nai Akiva. In those days, there was the late Joe Green, there was Mitzi Katz, there was Zelig Katz, those, and Solly Lieb got a little bit later on, but he was one of the founders of
And
B'nai
Isaac,
Akiva.
Dave Wax was very instrumental in the Israeli philatelic
Yes,
services here in South Africa.
that's what I was going to come to.
He actually he was in charge of it.
Yes, he was in charge of the
All the new
philatelics.
issues. I remember going with my late father Boris, going to Zikrani Bracha, going to his home and getting all the new issues.
Yes. That's why I mentioned that Dave Wax was very involved in the
Yeah.
Philatelic Society and very involved with the Zionist movement, as I said. Then, of course, in those days, before the B'nai Akiva, we had what we call a Shomer Hadati, and then afterwards became a Pol HaMizrahi, and then they formed the B'nai Akiva movement. So we want to wish all the families a Chaim Tovim Arukim, a long and a good life, and may they have no further sorrow. And on a very happy note, this is a relation of yours, Les, a hearty mazel tov to Jeff and Brenda Berlowitz, on the birth of a granddaughter to Yehuda and Michael Markovitz, and the baby's name is Tzipora Shira, named after late Jeff's mother, who passed away 2 weeks ago. So, let's wish them a heart and mazel tov. And also, mazel tov to Ronnie and Helen Raff on the birth of a granddaughter, to Yehuda and Leora Raff in Cape Town, and a hearty mazel tov to the great-grandparents. That's to Anne and Louis Raff, and and to Leora's parents, Richard and Malka Roberts. So, on behalf of everyone, hearty mazel tov, lechupa masim toi vin. Now, I just want to mention that this coming Sunday, it's very important, we have the Sinai in Darba, which promises to be very exciting. I'm sure many of you remember last year, the year before, and if you haven't booked yet, please, I don't know if the ticket's still available. I think it's through CompuTicket, or you can phone the office of the Chief Rabbi and make your arrangements there. There's going to be a wonderful program, and I know in the morning between 10 and 11 there's a program, a an audio visual on the life of Rabbi Azriel Goldfein, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Gedola, Zatzal, and I know because I was contributed quite a bit towards it, and so that should not be missed. Everybody should be there.
It's where the chief rabbi studied in the late Rabbi Goldfein's
Rabbi Goldfein was Chief Rabbi's Rosh Yeshiva. So this will be in honor of Rabbi Azriel.
They've got a wonderful lineup. I'll be there Motzei Shabbos and on Sunday.
They've got a wonderful lineup. Now, they've also got there, and I'll ask Steve was with us this evening, a little later on, to play a group called the Maccabees. And this looks very, very exciting. They're under the auspices of Young Israel in America. So we'll talk about that a little later on. So now, Les, over to you, and just give us a little bit of background. Les is very involved in stamps. I'm sure you know. He's been on the air with me 3 times now. And also he's a consultant for Stephen Welts. And they're doing wonderful work for the Jewish community. So just give us a bit of a background there.
Okay. Steve's going to just mention something before we start.
Go on. Okay. All right, so a guy's been dating a Chinese girl and wants to take the relationship up a notch. So one evening after a romantic date, he says, my beautiful Oriental princess, would you like to come up to my room to see my stamp collection? To which she replies, philately will get you nowhere.
Okay, Steve, and to our listeners out there, I think I did mention this the last time, but it's interesting. I'm going to ask you, what do these people in the list have in common? We take the royal family, the British royal family, Tsar Nicholas II, Ed Roosevelt, Sarkozy, Bibi Netanyahu, the late Simon Wiesenthal, Anthony Karpov, he's a grandmaster chess player, the late John Lennon, Freddie Mercury from Queen, Ronnie Woods. Now, Ronnie Woods is from the Rolling Stones. And interestingly, the Rolling Stones had a concert in Tel Aviv. It was straight after Shavuot, so I missed it, but 55,000 fans were present. They had tremendous pressure from the BDS not to be there, but they came, and the Rolling Stones performed to a delightful audience. So Ronnie Woods, he's part of this list, and Maria Sharapova. What do you think all these people, and to our listeners, what do you think all these people have in common?
If you know what they do have in common, SMS us on 34519.
Okay. So you mentioned with Stephen Wells, it's a big honor to be the international consultant, and a lot of people ask me, well, we've got we think it's very valuable stamps. What should we do with them? So my view is, if you want to sell them, personally, the best place to go is to an auction house, and Stephen Wells is the premier auction house in South Africa. Because basically what happens is you can take your stamps, you can get an approval, estimation, they'll value it, they'll see what there is. And if it goes on auction, then today the auctions are worldwide, it's global. You can be sitting in Tasmania or Alaska, and when the auction comes on, you just log into your computer and you have a global audience. So if somebody's interested in your stamp, or if there are 2 or 3 people interested, the prices really, really can skyrocket. And it's a win-win situation because there's a lot of trust based on selling stamps, but at an auction, it's all in the open, it's all above board. And Stefan Welsh just had the latest auction where it was incredible. They sold, somebody had a lot of Chinese stamps, and the Chinese stamps, the estimates, they put it on an estimate, and if more people are interested in the stamp, then it goes to the higher bidder. So just to give a little example, there was a lot of a strip of Mao Zedong. It was, it went for about 4 times the estimate. It was estimated at 15,000. It went for 65,000.
One stamp.
A strip of stamps.
Right. Can
Which
I
is
put out
quite
a
amazing.
question to our listeners? Who was Mao Zedong?
Okay.
Let's see if our listeners know. I'm sure the older generation certainly will know, the senior generation. But who was Mao Zedong? So if you do know, SMS 34519, and we're also waiting for an answer for what did those people have in common that Les laid out a little earlier. We haven't had an answer in about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll ask him to read it out again.
Okay, then the other thing, and I brought one here to the studio to show you guys. This is from my, well, it's not that valuable, it's from my private collection. Here's a penny black. This was the very first stamp that was issued.
Ever?
Ever, yeah, from Britain in 1840. Sir Roland
Wow.
Hall. And they actually had on the auction at Stephen Wells the very first, it was, there's 60 of these, but this is, I think, in extreme prime condition. It's the first day of issue of the penny black on cover. It's a first day cover.
Yeah.
And if someone's still interested, they should contact the Stephen Wells offices. But it was even in Stamp Magazine, they had an article about it because it was such a rare and amazing cover. So they had this done in Stamp Magazine.
What would a stamp like that go for?
Okay, so now this is what I want to mention to our listeners. And a bit of a hint. If you have stamps and you don't know what to do with them and you have them on letters, don't cut out the stamp. Don't tear it out. Sometimes, like with this stamp, the stamp alone would have been valuable, but having it on the letter, it increased the value of the stamp being on the letter and a first day cover with a date. So something like this was going for like R1 million. It's valued at over R1 million. So if somebody's got R1 million and they're keen on the very first stamp on the first day cover, it's a good buy. Those who've got it and those who want it, there's only 60 of these known. It's got a certificate by the Royal Philatelic Society of London, and it's still available. But it's really a remarkable item. If, like in 1840, they would have cut out the stamp or torn off the stamp, it would have been worth a couple of pounds. But being a first day cover, it's the value just escalates dramatically.
Steve, do you remember, were you ever a stamp collector or
No, never.
not involved at all? Because you know, when we were at school, particularly when we went from, say, primary school to then to secondary to high school, our hobbies were stamps. We were all stamp collectors, and everybody used to come to school and show off their albums, and it was something amazing. But today, I would say that youngsters have. Do you see, Les, do you agree with me? Have lost their interest?
No, not at all. When I go to the various stamp exhibitions, and I've been in Jakarta and Australia and in Israel and here, but mainly abroad, especially in Israel, there is such interest from the youngsters. And what the philatelic societies are doing, they are encouraging the kids to get involved. So I want to show you this. I used to schlep my daughters along, and they were actually really keen to go, both my daughters. So they had a caricaturist who drew a caricature of both my daughters.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and then what happens is you wait a while, but not that long in a queue, then it goes onto a stamp.
Well,
And this is a stamp that you can post. It goes next to the stamp. This was done quite a while ago in 06, and my daughters used to love coming to the exhibitions, but it was really lovely,
Fantastic,
and this
yeah.
becomes a stamp. Then what they did for my daughter's bat mitzvah, you could also have a photograph taken. And next to the stamp is your photograph. So when you put it on the letter, so when we had the invitations for the bat mitzvah, here was a picture of my daughters
and the stamp.
and the stamp next to it.
Fantastic.
Then in Israel is so innovative. They are incredible what they did to really encourage the youth they devised something which was a unique event. They gave paper and anyone could write or create their own stamp, which was a novel idea. So you had the kids there drawing pictures, writing, and that became the stamp. So here's, you can see over here, my older daughter did this, put Ani Yudika, I'm a proud Jewess, and the bottom one, my daughter wrote Sipi. This was from Sharoni, my older daughter, and my younger daughter, and this became the stamp. So they designed their own stamp. It became very popular. And it was first, well, Israel, I think, was the first country to initiate this project, which is amazing. And this has value, and it became a stamp.
Right. I just wanted to mention we do have an SMS here to say they are all stamp collectors.
Ah, wonderful. Look at our very clever listeners out there.
All stamp collectors. You know, and stamping is very educational, not only geographically, historically, arts, biblically as well, because there are so many themes that appears on stamps. For example, Israel has issued a whole series on the Bible.
No, they've issued many.
Yes,
and on the festivals, on a whole lot of
festivals
different
that I
items,
say. And then if you go to the different countries, they also show the history, like in South Africa, we had a whole series on fauna and flora, all the different flowers that were in Kirstenbosch and all that type of thing. So it's a very educational thing as well.
Okay, Isaac and Steve, I'm just going to mention this. This was on last year's auction. This was possibly one of the most amazing items. You have a stamp here, you can see. It's from 1913, the Union King. Okay, this stamp had an inverted watermark. Now, a watermark is in the paper, it was inverted, and it's very rare. It's actually the most expensive out of all the South African stamps. And this one went for 650,000 rand.
Wow.
Somebody paid. It's very, very rare. People who collect, different themes, but for South Africa, whoever bought the stamp, this is a prized possession. It's unique and it's the only one known. It's got a certificate and it went. Somebody was willing to pay 650,000.
Wow.
So if one has value, if you think you have stamps that have value, the best advice is to take it in, get evaluated under no obligation, and you never know, you could be sitting on something exceptionally valuable.
Correct.
Another nice tip for our listeners out there, also what's happening now is Mandela memorabilia has become very, very popular worldwide. So the late Nelson Mandela, he might have written a signature, signed or autographed something. Don't throw it away, keep it. They've auctioned in the last year. Stephen Wells also had an auction where they had a lot of Mandela memorabilia. It went for nearly R1 million. It was quite an incredible. It was an incredible collection with Muhammad Ali. Somebody had this collection of Nelson Mandela, and it went.
Yeah, shows you.
The director of the Long Walk to Freedom, he was instrumental in obtaining it.
Right, we're going to take an ad break. We'll be back in a few moments.
Are we doing it? Okay, there's other things. This will be very good.
Play a bit of music.
Yeah.
You let me know when you want to come
This is
back on.
McBeats.
Yeah.
Now after this, start talking about the book.
Okay.
The book just now, and then Steve will read out the review.
Okay.
I just want to ask that question about Mao Tse-tung.
You let me know when you want to go back on here.
Oh yeah, no, just
So the next section we'll do the book, and then after that I've got other things.
yes, I know, but then Steve will do the review for you.
You don't mind reading this?
No.
Please, Steve. I want Steve to be involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got no problem.
I've been on here since 3 o'clock.
Otherwise, he sits here. He's been here since 3 o'clock. But this is interesting, Steve.
Yeah, it is. Very interesting. I never...
So far, it's
Yeah, I've never thought about stamps and that.
We, as kids, we used to run to town to Robertson's,
some more.
remember?
You're going to see some more interesting stuff.
Robertson's used to be in the
there
old
was in the,
arcade.
that's right. That's right.
I remember his late father Boris used to exhibit at the Zionist Federation whenever we had Yom Ha'atzmaut. His father had all the Israeli exhibitors. It was unbelievable.
I remember the interview because you said you went to Jakarta.
Yeah. Oh, you're pretty good.
And how
Yeah.
you were well received by
Exceptionally.
Turkish. You met a Turkish guy,
Iranian.
correct?
I'm still
Iranian.
in touch with Iranian.
Yeah, that's right. I remember
It's
it now.
incredible.
And how there was no Jewish issue there
Not I wear my yarmulke.
Indonesia, yeah.
They have the Israeli flag.
because they're not exactly the friends of Israel, are they?
They're not too bad. It's Malaysia.
Malaysia, yeah.
It was so grateful that I was there. Look, I did discuss it. I don't want to discuss it again, but this was the picture
All
of.
right, wearing a kippah in Jakarta.
This was the picture of the.
The
that I
Iranian.
gave them.
That's right.
No, the Iranian I didn't put in. I've got pictures in home.
Who's that sheep?
This
there?
was just
So
somebody
Arab.
who attended.
Okay.
But the Iranian, no, I didn't. You know, I didn't do it for that reason because he fucking killed a guy. You know, it's,
fair, true.
And then look at this one. This was in Australia.
Sure.
Outside
Amazing.
the-
Transcends.
This was outside the Israeli booth, and they were prepared to have these pictures. They were just like visitors to the exhibition.
Yeah, interesting, eh?
Shows it breaks all barriers.
Yeah.
So this is the Maccabees.
We've got 30 seconds left.
Okay. Towards the end, I'll announce all the birthdays. There's a list here. Unbelievable.
Okay, 16 seconds.
Okay.
You're going to go back on air just now?
Yeah.
Frequency like no other. 101.9 High FM. You're listening to Talk to the Town with Isaac Resnick on 101.9 High FM.
Welcome back. 22 minutes past 7. Your host Isaac Resnick with Steve Marks, and we have in our studio our guest Les Glassman, talking all about stamps. But I just wanted to mention about Sinai in Daba, and if you just tuned in, the music you heard was from a group called the Maccabees, who will be present on Sunday at Sinai in Daba, not to be missed. And if you haven't booked yet, I suggest you contact the CompuTicket, or you can phone the office of the Chief Rabbi. Now, Les, we were talking all about these valuable stamps. I put out the question, who was Mao Tse-tung? If some of you do know, I'm sure you do remember. I'll give you a hint. China, Communist Party. So if you do know, please SMS 34519.
Okay, Isaac, I'm going to just briefly go on because it's quite interesting. The most valuable stamp in the world. We can ask our listeners if they know. What is today the most valuable stamp in the world? So you can get your hands on this stamp because in New York, on June the 17th, which is pretty soon, it's in just about a week, the stamp is going on sale.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
terrific.
It is the British Guiana, 1856, 1 cent. A 1 cent stamp, and it's going up for auction for the first time in 10 years. The previous person who bought the stamp, actually it's quite an amazing story. He bought the stamp, and it was a John DuPont. Then if you remember the story, and he killed, there was somebody in his house. It was quite a tragic story. Dave Schultz, who was Olympic gold medalist, and he was training in his home or whatever, and he shot him and he was in jail. Anyway, he passed away, and his estate was selling the stamp. He bought it back, it was in, it wasn't that long ago that he bought it, and he paid just under $1 million for that
A
stamp.
million rand or dollars?
In 1980, it was just under $1 million, 935,000 in 1980. Now it's on auction, and the going price is 10 million. And they think they're going to get it. It's the rarest stamp in the world,
Wow.
and it's got 2
So how many are there
certificates.
of it?
No, this is the only one that
There's only
exists.
one that
And this
exists.
was found by a 12-year-old Scottish boy who was in his parents' home in the attic there, and he saw the stamp, and he took it to a dealer, and he sold it, and then the price just went up.
We have an SMS from a lady who says it's the penny black. Regards from ETL Turgle. No, that's not the most valuable
No,
stamp.
that was the very first stamp.
That's the very first stamp was the penny black. But this one that Leslie spoke about is the most valuable in the world. So if you do know, you can SMS 34519.
And then, recently, just last month, on the 21st of May, if you look at this stamp, can you see something's like a bit different?
Yeah, it's upside down.
It's called the inverted Jenny. It's
Right.
the plane is inverted. So this is
So there wasn't a mistake. It's supposed to be like a
no, they printed one sheet by mistake
upside
when
down.
upside down,
Yeah.
and somebody was very fortunate in buying the sheet, and then he sold it, and then unfortunately it's a pity because it would have been amazing if the sheet would have been intact. But they cut up the sheet. They put them in
They split it
blocks and they split it up. So this stamp, which they say is in pristine condition, it's the mint. It's untouched. It hasn't been hinged. It's in pristine mint condition. So this was sold in New York on the 21st of May and went for 600,000.
So that's
for one
24 cents US postage. It's red on the outside with a blue biplane
Yeah.
upside down on the inside.
stamp. And this went for $600,000.
Dollars.
But still, that's big money. That's big money. But that's the value of stamps. So not every, you don't have to be a millionaire to collect stamps. Stamps, there are so many different themes. You can collect thematics. You can collect Judaica. There are so many. I'll show you later about Judaica. In fact, this is quite an interesting thing. I belong to quite a few societies. So this is a society in Portugal, and they send me catalogs and they send me the newsletter. So it was very thoughtful of them. From Portugal, they sent me a stamp, a Portuguese stamp, which has a Serita de Brot, the Ten
The
Commandments.
10
on.
Commandments.
So they know that I live in Israel, and they sent me the
It's
stamp
thoughtful,
which is
yeah.
printed in Portugal with the Ten Commandments on. But there are so many different themes that one can collect, and it's inexpensive. It's wonderful quality family time. The whole family can get involved. One can collect sports. We're having the World Cup Thursday night, starting the World Cup. Many people collect soccer on stamps or sports on stamps. You can collect a country, different themes, and it's a very inexpensive hobby which can actually be very rewarding.
While we're talking about, remember when you were last in the studio, we were speaking about the Holocaust. And there's that book you said about the Holocaust on stamps.
Okay, so this is another example. This is an example of the book. It's called Descent into the Abyss. So what happened is, I'll just give a very brief outline because we're very fortunate to have Steve in the studio who will read a little review on the book, which I did. But this was a most phenomenal thing. I was invited as Israeli commissioner to Joburg 2010, and together, which you'll read later, members of the SIP, the Society of Israel Philately, which is a wonderful organization, and I really urge all our members to become involved in it. We saw a collection at the end of the hall on the Holocaust, and we were blown away. Steve, if you can take it
Yeah,
from me.
certainly. Descent into the Abyss, reviewed by Dr. Les Glassman. I was fortunate enough to attend the Joburg 2010 International Stamp Exhibition in South Africa as the Israeli Commissioner, together with the members of the local Society of Israel Philatelist, SIP, which included Maurice Daniels, Brian Grusd, and Selwyn Uriah. We were pleasantly surprised to hear that there was a 5-frame Holocaust exhibit from New Zealand. When we first viewed the exhibit, we were completely mesmerized. The research and material displayed was astonishing. We realized that this was much more than a philatelic exhibit, but rather a testament and memorial to the darkest period in modern Jewish and world history. With the unwavering support of Jenny Banfield, the New Zealand Commissioner, and members of the SIP in the United States, the exhibit was transformed into a unique and remarkable book. Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor Nobel Peace Prize laureate, coined the eternal expression, "Not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were victims." He also stated that the total humiliation and utter contempt for humanity shown in Hitler's death camps, which culminated in the Holocaust, is a unique event which has universal significance and must be memorized incessantly. Bruce Chatterton's Descent into the Abyss embodies this statement. The book showcases original letters, postcards, and covers connected to the Shoah and is further augmented by the inclusion of non-philatelic material such as photographs, propaganda items, government documents, and newspaper articles. The book is divided into 10 chapters. It opens with the first years of Nazi rule, followed by Kristallnacht, the shattering of the synagogue glass, which was the precursor to the shattering of Jewish life in Europe. This was followed by the invasion of Europe and the occupation and propaganda employed by the Nazi regime. The book presents evidence of the pain and despair that Jews experienced in the ghettos and the death camps. It is a documented testament to the victims of the final solution and pays tribute to the resistance culminating in the last days of the Reich and the liberation of the camps. The social aspect of the book makes it unique. With the help of Yad Vashem and concentration camp museums in Germany and Austria, the author placed tremendous effort in researching the fates of those who wrote letters and postcards. This is the main feature of the book. The author goes on to explain, I have been blessed with the opportunity to put two families in touch with correspondence from deceased family members that they have never seen. It was just over 60 years ago that 6 million tears fell to the ground. The world stood still. It did not make a sound. Unfortunately, in recent years, there has been a re-emergence of fascists and Holocaust deniers. However, Bruce Chatterton has not remained silent. His descent into the abyss is a refutation of those Holocaust deniers. With the publishing of this important work, the memory of the Shoah and those who suffered will now be engraved in people's minds forever. I highly recommend Descent into the Abyss as an invaluable book for all SIP members and philatelists. No doubt this monumental work will also appeal to the general public and institutions engaged in fostering Holocaust awareness.
Thank you, Steve. And I know we discussed this when Les was here last year in December. It is an absolute amazing book. And I think it should be in every home, every child, every school, every high school should have one in their library as well. Where would it, can we purchase it? Where is it available?
Okay, so I'll tell you. David Aronovitz from the Kollel Bookshop has been very, very generous. He's going to be selling it basically at cost at the Kollel Bookshop. So that's in Northfield Centre, Northfield Avenue, Glen Hazel. And it's basically the price of the printing. And it's so recommended for, this is history that you can have in your home. You can read through it. You don't have to be a philatelist to have it. Anybody's interested in Jewish history. The person who wrote it, Bruce Chatterton, it was incredible. I phoned him and asked him, his opinion on the review. He was like crying on the phone. He was so appreciative. Now what's happened with him, he doesn't get a cent royalties from the book. He doesn't want a cent. He's not a wealthy person. He lives in New Zealand. The book was at the exhibition in Australia, and I really wanted to meet him there, but he told me that he had just lost his job and he couldn't afford to go to Australia for that exhibition, which was in May last year. And it's incredible. He wants no money from this book. He just wants people to read it, to be aware of what happened, and he feels this is a contribution that he's made to the memories of those who perished.
Very noble.
And how
And
did he
just
get,
the most amazing person. So I asked him, Bruce, like, how did you get involved in this? He's not Jewish.
Yes.
And he lives, New Zealand's the other side of the world. It's incredible. So he said his father was very, very into history. He was very learned and he had many books on history. And he passed that love of history on to his son, on to Bruce. And he started collecting. He's a philatelist. And some of the material here, it's invaluable. For us, it's priceless. But he didn't pay much for it. You can get it on eBay. You can get a lot of this material going through stamp auctions, seeing. He saw like letters, and it had the names of people on. So to somebody just paging through, it means nothing. But when you delve into it, and that's why for our readers out there, if you've got envelopes, this is your history. You could have, and I'll just mention, I went once on eBay, and I saw an envelope. I think I mentioned this last time.
Yes.
This is incredible. I was on eBay and I saw quite a nice hippopotamus. It was from Aklik, Mozambique. So I bid on it. It cost maybe $5, $10, and I got it. And when it came, you only had the front of the letter. I turned it around and it said, Mrs. L. Schwartz, P.O. Box 235 Byron. Mrs. L. Schwartz is my wife's late grandmother.
Wow.
And this, we don't have any other letters that survive. This is like one of the only letters, and this is in her handwriting that I've got on eBay. So people that have letters, keep them. Go through them. The letter might be inside. This is history. This is something that is, it's priceless, and it's so enjoyable. And there's, you're not spending any money on it. You have these treasures at home.
Can I just interrupt there? I have still letters from my late parents, what they got from Russia, from Lithuania, just before the war. And it used to take 3 to 6 months before they got the letters. And it still got those Soviet USSR stamps on them, with the envelope and all that. I've still got all those letters.
So I just-
It's an amazing thing.
It is amazing.
And you've got to keep these things. It's historical. It's not like today you get on the email and you get onto fax and this.
You've seen somebody's handwriting.
Somebody's handwriting. And they wrote letters in those days, not 1 page or 2 pages, 12, 15 pages, giving the whole history, what was going on for the last 6 or 7 months, what was happening there. Because what other contact did they have? So I've still got all those envelopes, all those letters.
So I'll just mention, I once exhibited the Mozambique collection in Tel Aviv, and I got an urgent call saying that somebody has to buy the one cover. It wasn't a very expensive cover. It was from Kibrit. Never forget the name Kibrit. So they gave me the contact number. I phoned them. I said, why are you so interested in the one cover? I've got better covers. Why in that cover? I'm not selling anything, but why are you so interested in this cover? So she said, that is our family. We knew that there was Kibrit in Alexandria, but we had no idea that there was a Kibrit in Beira in Mozambique. So I said, what I'll do? I'll color photocopy it, I'll send it to you, and I did, and she was so delighted. So, from stamps, she learned that, part of the family was in Mozambique, which just by going to that exhibition and just going through pages, she saw her own family in my frame. It was something quite an amazing thing.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm going to take a break. We'll be back in a few moments. I'm just going to mention the birthdays quickly, otherwise they'll be cross with me.
This is
Stephen was very well
101.9
read.
High FM.
Exceptional.
You going to play a song or
No,
we'll come back?
Come back.
You're listening to Talk of the Town with Isaac Resnick on 101.9 High FM.
Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, we have in the studio with us, there's Glassman, and Steve and I were absolutely fascinated. Some of the stories he's told us about stamp collecting. Steve read out a beautiful review on this book, which was published by a Gentile in New Zealand, all about the Holocaust.
He wrote it.
Big
Yeah.
pardon?
Bruce wrote
Yes.
it's his exhibition.
Yes.
And can I just mention Morris? Morris Daniels and Brian Cruz and Selwyn Uriah, members of SIP. And I do encourage our listeners to become members or even to visit the society. Can I give out just Morris's number?
Yes, sure, with
It's
pleasure.
082 385 9736, or Brian's number 082 521 0777. So anybody who's more interested in the book, it's at the Collal, but you can also phone Morris or Brian, who are very involved in SIP, and they'll get you in touch, or specifically with SIP, the Society of Israel Philanthropy.
Just give us the title of the book again.
Okay, the title is Descent into the Abyss, and David Ranovitz from the Collal Bookshop has been so kind that he has it in his in the Collal, and we can order it, and he'll be bringing it also to the side in Dava, so people can see it there as well. But it's highly recommended, and the price, it's really at cost.
I can recommend it. It is so historical. You showed it to me last time. It is
So
unbelievable.
Isaac, it's a gift. And I
Thank
wanna
you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. This is unbelievable. And the first thing tomorrow, I'll show it to my brother, because both of my brother and myself, are so involved in this type of thing. It's very, very involved in this. Now, just before we continue, I just have to mention a few birthday dates, because unfortunately we missed last week. Well, it was Yontif. At the Selwyn Siegel, there was the birthday of Philip Leader on the 4th. And then on the 8th was Maya Andrea Froelich. The 10th of June, that's today, Cliff Gordon. And today as well, Benita Abrams at Kibbutz Labna. And the 11th tomorrow is Michael Tichner. And on the 17th is Paul Lipper. And on the 21st will be Myrna Hoff. So we all wish them hearty Mazel Tov and Yom Yoledet, and may they have lots of nachas, and may their family have a lot of nachas from them. And a little bit later on, I'll read out the list from Sandringham Gardens, because it's quite a long list as well, because we haven't been on air for 2 weeks. So over again to you, Les.
Yeah, I've got a nice surprise for you guys. If you look, and to our listeners out there, if you look at the stamp, the one on the right is from Lesotho, and do you know who's in it?
Looks like an Arab guy.
No, that is
Oh, it's Rashi. No, Maimonides.
Maimonides. Maimon.
So Lesotho issued
Maimon,
a stamp of Maimonides, which is absolutely
that's interesting.
incredible. So did Sierra Leone. It's a collection that I have. Antigua and Barbados, Grenada, Dominica, and Guinea.
But what is the reason for them issuing?
Okay, it was the 850th anniversary of the death of Maimonides.
Rambam.
And he was a philosopher. He was just gigantic.
He was a doctor.
He was a doctor to the
In Egypt.
in Egypt.
In Egypt, he was a doctor.
Yeah, and he
Lost
was
his-
a philosopher. He was.
The Mishnah Torah, the Code of Jewish
But
Law.
it just shows how countries throughout the world recognize the Rambam, the Maimonides, and it's a phenomenal thing. And to think Lesotho had a stamp that they issued in the honor of Maimonides. What's also quite nice is here's a stamp of Denmark, of
Shabbat.
a lady lighting candles from Denmark, and here was one from Italy, where it says Bereshit.
The beginning, the
Beautiful,
creation.
man. Beautiful.
So this is a theme which any of our listeners out there can start collecting on Judaica. You can look at stamps and you can see, and it's research you can do. You can see somebody and say, well, they Jewish origin, and there's so many stamps there, and it's a very big field, Judaica, the Judaica field.
Can I ask a question? The Vatican, do they issue their own stamps?
Yes, they do. The Vatican, they have their own stamps, and they have issued for quite a while already, and it's also very collectible.
And do they have any Jewish themes on their stamps? Because don't forget.
Well, now with the recent Pope's visit, it will be interesting to see if they have issued a stamp, if they will issue a stamp on the
visit.
on the visit. But they have had various stamps where various popes have come to Israel and they've had views with it.
Yes, but biblical themes. I'm talking
Sure,
about.
they've had a lot of biblical.
But also on the what's it they call the Old Testament and on the
Yeah.
they have on that.
No, they have had, and it's very collectible. Here's actually a stamp, interestingly, from Brazil, where it has a Magen David and a Sefer Torah.
And
So it's
what's
from, this was just the three different religions. So they had Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And just, it's people seeing the stamp, it's so educational to the population. So they see, they see Judaism, Christianity, the three.
What's interesting is you've spoken about the different countries that have had different contributions, etc., and how religion has played no part in it other than informative and there's no favoritism. It sort of transcends all that.
So stamps know no boundaries.
Yeah.
They cross ocean and seas. And I found it in my going to the various exhibitions in Jakarta and in Australia. Here, wearing a yarmulke has never been a problem.
Yeah.
You're meeting people. I mean, I've become very close with so many different.
It's unlikely,
nationalities.
however, that you'd find a stamp from Saudi Arabia with a Magen David on it.
Okay, so this is something interesting.
It's a challenge. Eh?
Okay, Steve, mentioning this was a stamp. I don't know if you remember seeing this. Very interestingly, the Netherlands, they issued this stamp in 1933. Now, the person who wrote this article, it was in the South African Philatelist. South African Philatelist, this was the front page of the South African Philatelist, where they have
the menorah.
the Hanukkah, and this was for the December holidays, the Christmas, but they chose to put a menorah with a. Look, it's so
Festive, really, very
it's
nice,
amazing. It was
yeah.
really nice of the
As
South
opposed to a
African
Christmas
Philatelist.
tree, yeah.
It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
But they published this article by Jan Bakker, and Jan Bakker's father was once the president of the Israeli Society. And I remember going with my late father to meetings, and Jan Bakker was there, who's not Jewish, he's Dutch, and he was the president of the SRP in South Africa. So this is a phenomenal article about this stamp where they had, it's the Star of David. It wasn't intended to be the star, they just, it was a symbol with a dove.
Yeah, yeah.
And when
And a
Hitler
sword,
came,
looks like
when,
a sword there down the middle. There's another sword. Okay.
yeah, but it was something that they did. It was issued in Holland for the League of Nations, and for world peace, and the dove represents
Yeah.
world peace. And what happened is Hitler was so outraged by this stamp that he said, if any letters come with a stamp, they won't be posted. So in 1937, the Netherlands withdrew the stamp.
What is the position with Nazi stamps?
Okay, so that is a little bit controversial. There are people that collect it.
Yeah.
And in the Descent into the Abyss, by actually you'll see in their book, it's incredible. You'll actually see the letters that were written by the Gestapo. People who say the Holocaust denies, it didn't happen. Here you have the evidence. Anybody can have in their hands the evidence that it really did happen, and you have the actual letters written by the worst people that have ever been against our people.
Yeah.
And here you have the actual physical evidence. So,
So are they collectible? I mean,
it is collectible. There are people that collect Nazi Germany. There was also the inflation rates in Germany. But if you use it for purposes like Bruce did, then it's very positive and it's a good thing what he did. It's tremendous what he did.
how would you feel about owning stamps like that? I mean, I suppose as a collector, it would be part of being a collector. But I'm sure there's an emotional...
There is an emotional.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous emotional. It's not only Nazi Germany. You have
There's lots of
Lithuania, all the countries
Sure.
in Europe.
Yeah, Lithuania as well.
Suppose
But what is
Yeah.
interesting, if one has
Austria.
a letter, keep that letter because it could have very important information for future generations and about the history, who sent the envelope, who did it go to, who received it,
Yeah, yeah.
the different rates, the different way that it actually got there.
It's fantastic.
Right.
Chris.
Les, tell us, I don't know if Steve was remember, because about the stamp that was issued by the South African government, where they mentioned the name of Hashem, or they printed the name of Hashem on the stamp. And what's the
Okay,
what
so
happened there?
this was also something in 1987. They had issued a Bible series, and this is the Bible series with a stamp saying Devar Hashem in Hebrew, and it's got the name of Hashem. So it came to the attention of the South African Jewish philatelists that there's going to be a stamp with God's name. Now, the problem with a stamp like this is that it can fall on the floor, you can throw it into the rubbish, and you can't do that with God's name.
But it says Hashem.
Yeah, this
no,
is the
it's
same.
got it. They've got it.
So what happened is that
You
the
pay
South
by
African
pay.
postal authorities, they heard that it's a bit of a complaint against the stamp because it could be desecrated, and they'd already issued it. So they had such sensitivity, it's incredible, to the Jewish community that they withdrew the stamp. And on the first day of issue, in certain outlying post offices, it was sent. So a few of these stamps do exist. I'm very fortunate to have one in my collection. There was a whole sheet that was sold on a Stephen Wells auction, and it went for, it's very valuable,
Yeah.
exceptionally valuable. But what I think was absolutely incredible with the South African postal authorities, they had the sensitivity to the Jewish
When was
community.
this? How many years ago?
This was in 1987. And they just had the
That's very
three
interesting.
stamps at the top, and this is one. So if you see a blue stamp with Hashem's name on, it's pretty
Hashem.
valuable. Okay, but that just shows the sensitivity.
When was it issued? In 87? you said?
1987.
Okay.
But what can I just mention?
Yes.
And here we have something really to be proud of. In 4 years ago, when I was at the exhibition, I actually saw some very interesting stamps. These are the stamp with hand signals. And I didn't know that the person who designed the stamp, she's actually been awarded a PhD, the most incredible lady, Susan Wolf. She designed a set of 8 stamps. It's for sighted and blind people,
Taxi hand signs.
or taxi hand signs.
That's brilliant.
That is the most incredible stamp. It was selected by stampnews.com as the 5th most important issue for 2010. Now that is a most remarkable achievement. To be in the top 10 and to be number 5 in the world issued stamps for 2010 is absolutely remarkable. And I've been to her studio, and she's a remarkable lady. She just obtained her PhD from Wits. So kolakavod to Susan, you deserve it.
Jewish lady.
Jewish lady.
Yes.
Lovely.
And we're going to be having an article in the SIP on the issuing of the stamp. Something also very interesting, which I didn't know until recently, there was a stamp which was also issued recently, a few years ago, by a Kim Berman. Kim Berman is a
The
professor.
daughter of Mona Berman.
Yeah, the daughter and the sister of Larry Lurie,
Yes.
who I know very well in Israel.
Lordy.
And when I've been in her home, it's family friends of ours. So Kim is the professor at UJ. She's an art professor at UJ, and she designed a stamp about Alexandria, the townships. It's a remarkable stamp as well, and was issued.
Beautiful.
And
So
you know,
that
I'm
is-
just mentioned Mona Berman, her father Let's see if any of our listeners know who her father was. They were very involved in the tobacconist business. So let's see if they remember who Mona Berman's father was.
Just to add on with South Africa,
just
we
it's
can
very
be really,
important.
you're right. I think we can be so proud. You know, the South African, they've done such a service to the community. They also issued in 2013 a stamp. These are the stamps. The Rivonia Trial, and in the Rivonia Trial, it was the 50th anniversary prestige booklet. It's amazing to think that in that Rivonia Trial, I mean, this is our history. This is history that we can all be really proud of. They have, how many Jews do you think were involved in that Rivonia
Well, there
Trial?
were quite a lot of Jews involved.
On
So
both
these stamps,
sides. On both sides.
it's true.
No,
the
but I
pro-
can
the
name them
prosecutor
to you.
and the defender were Jewish.
I can name them all to you if you
But
want.
there's Dennis Goldberg, there's a stamp of Dennis Goldberg, Arthur Goldreich. Arthur Goldreich
Arthur
was
Goldreich.
actually the dean at Bezalel.
Yes.
He passed away not so long ago.
Yes, and then there's Walpy.
You're right, Walpy,
Yeah.
Harold Walpy,
And Bernstein.
Ronald Bernstein. Isaac, you are amazing. So these are the stamps. So if people, you know, this is you can go to post office, you can go to a stamp dealer, and you can touch history. These are people that were in the Rivonia Trial. What was interesting, just coming from Israel, and still I'm amazed that people don't know this. I mentioned to a lot of people here, do you know that Nelson Mandela had a black boss?
A black?
A black boss. A boss.
Boss.
No, a white boss.
Oh, no, sorry, Nelson
White boss,
Mandela.
Les
Yeah,
Sadelsky
that's
was
right.
his
He
boss.
had a white boss.
Les Sadelsky.
He had a white boss called Les Sadelsky. And most people have no idea. They don't have an idea. You know, when he was article clerk, so Les was one of the only ones that would give him a job.
Let me just tell you that Nelson Mandela, come here, Nelson Mandela, Les Sadelsky, got him the job through a chap called Walter Sisulu.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, Walter Sisulu had a little estate business and used to sell property and land in Alexander Township. But being a black man, he couldn't do any legal work, he couldn't register it, etc. So he went to Les Sadelsky, and one day he said to Les Sadelsky, look, I've got a man who's coming from the Transkei who needs to be articled. And Les Sadelsky gave him the job. And they became very close. And Mandela said, I only had one boss, and that was Les Sadelsky, because I remember, as an aside, we went to Codessa. You remember we were having the first one reference with the late Chief Rabbi and myself, Chief Rabbi Harris, and somebody, F.W. Clark and P.W. Burt walked past, and somebody said to Mandela, there goes your boss. He says, he's not my boss. I've only had one boss,
And it was
his
Les.
name is Les Sadelsky.
Amazing.
And by the way, you know who was with Mandela at Les Sadelsky as an article clerk? Nat Bregman. I'm sure many of you
Yes,
remember
many
him as
do,
well.
sure.
Nat Bregman. I could give you the whole history, but that's for another time. I want to take a break. We'll be back in a few moments. Isn't it amazing how this all comes about? All through stamps, eh? We can talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey?
Absolutely.
At least I'm sure tonight you've learned something, Steve, about
I have. I mean, I've never ever been this sort of this kind of exposure.
Is it interesting?
Yeah, it is very,
And
very interesting.
unbelievable. You've never had known about
Yeah.
this.
I mean, some of the. I mean, just the first day, the covers in it are
It's
beautiful. I mean,
incredible. Some things.
it's very artistic. It's creative. I mean, I love this one. Just happened upon it.
But when you show us all these other things, now just go back. The first question you asked. That's
Oh,
that
okay.
British Guinea.
Yeah. It's
What-
yeah. It's the.
No, we
You
haven't.
know, I kind of gave it away because I mentioned how much it was going for.
Yes, but what was the name or what was the stamp? It is the most valuable stamp in
Yeah.
the world today.
The British Guinea, 1856.
You'll mention it, okay? Also, we have no response. Now, I just want to quickly read out this list. I have to, otherwise it'll be bogus.
Jesus,
Hey,
fantastic.
I'm going to get
amazing.
Steve a book like this as well.
Fantastic.
I'll get you one.
Beautiful.
I'll get you one, Steve.
Okay, you want to go?
Okay, let's go on.
Go back on here.
Yeah.
You're listening to Talk of the Town with Isaac Resnick on 101.9 High FM.
Welcome back, 6 minutes to 8. Les, just put back that question about the most valuable stamp today. we haven't had a response, then you can tell us what the stamp
Okay,
is.
so for our listeners out there, if you're interested in buying it, it's going on auction on June the 17th in New York, and the estimate price is $10 million. So for those who are keen, this is a good buy. Okay, so the stamp is actually the British Guiana, 1856, 1 cent. So you can imagine the person who paid 1 cent for the stamp all those years ago, today it's worth more than 10 million US dollars.
10 million US
But you-
dollars multiplied by 10 today, it's 100 million rand.
So Isaac,
Just for a 1 cent stamp, 1 penny.
and Steve, if you look at this stamp, not only are stamps going back to 1856, but even some modern stamps are also pretty valuable. Here was a stamp issued by Germany honoring Audrey Hepburn. What's interesting about the stamp? Because the stamp was actually withdrawn.
Well, it's sideways.
Yeah.
Okay. She has
It's
something in her
got-
mouth.
Something in her mouth.
It's a cigarette.
Yeah, so her family objected to the fact that they did a stamp with a picture of her smoking a cigarette.
Okay.
So they withdrew the stamp. And a few of them managed to were printed. These are exceptionally valuable as well. So even modern stamps today can be really valuable. This is worth like more than 100,000 euros.
But what
Wow.
would Germany be issuing a stamp in for Audrey Hepburn?
I think being a great actress,
Or
and
something,
how
because
she
she
influenced so many
she wasn't a
people.
German actress.
No, but she influenced,
Yeah.
people enjoyed her movies.
Right. I just have to divert for a moment. I've got to give the birthdays for Sandringham Gardens because we missed, and there may be some a little bit upset. So there was, on the 6th of June, Rachel Barnett, and the 8th, Harry Israel. On the 9th is Ethel Brenkel, the 11th, Celia Brody, the 12th, Dawn August, David Rubenstein the 12th, Hyman Rosenbach the 12th, Simon Wolf the 12th, Philip Chipovitz the 13th, Harry Samuels on the 14th, Marsha Klein the 17th, Debbie Favish on the 17th, and Maxine Favish on the 18th. And then when we get to next week, and I'll read out the balance of this. Well, it's been a pleasure having you in the studio, Les. We look forward to you every time you come. Really, it's the most fascinating
Isaac, thank you so much, and Steve, for having me. It's been such a pleasure. It's really so wonderful being here. I listen to Chai FM in Israel. I tell so many of my friends and patients to listen as well. You're doing such an amazing job.
Les, just give us an address or phone number again for those who want to join the Philatelic Society in South Africa.
Okay, so we can contact Morris Daniels at 082 385 9736 or Brian Grooves at 082 521 0777. And the book, Descent into the Abyss, and this is really worthwhile. They're not making any profit. David Aronovitz is doing a major, major service to the Jewish community and to the general community. They're selling it at cost. It's going to be at the Kollel Bookshop. That's in Northfield Center, Northfield Avenue, Glen Hazel. It's opposite Osamer. And their number is 011 440 6679. So with the stamp of approval, I really want to thank you all for having me.
It's a
And
pleasure.
to all our listeners, just enjoy the hobby. It's a fascinating, wonderful hobby. And you should just get Nachas being together with a family. It's really a family-orientated hobby that you will benefit so much by.
Right, I just want to read out an email, which is a very important email. And it reads, Hi Isaac, fantastic show with you, Steve and Les. Thank you. Just to wish you, would want to wish Ronnie Mink Refuah Shlema, his Hebrew name Yerachmeel Monash Ben Tzilla. He underwent major surgery for his pancreas, unsuccessful.
Wait.
He's having chemo, and Bezrat Hashem, he should be well. He used to be on Chai FM. Remember, on a Sunday evening, Ronnie Mink, it was called that. The rest is history. That was on a Sunday. between 6 and 8.
Ronnie was my teacher at Yeshiva College, and he instilled the love for history.
Yes, and he was an expert on the Holocaust. And talking about history of the Holocaust and other interesting stories, enjoying the show, with regards to all Cy and Stanley. Now, just let me tell you something about Ronnie Mink. His late grandfather was Reverend Reichenberg. And Ronnie Mink's mother, with a daughter, lived in Vryheid. And Reverend Reichenberg used to be the rabbi, first of Bertram's, then he came to Jeppe Shul. And he couldn't write English properly. and I used to write all his letters for him
What a small
to
world.
all his children wherever they were.
Wow.
He had a daughter in Southwest Africa, Namibia. He had there one in Cape Town. He had one here in Joburg, and he had in Vryheid. And I was very, very close to them. So that's where I know the minks from, Vryheid. And Ronnie's got a brother, I'm sure you all know as well, who plays this music he used to call the big band stand, all those modern jazz pieces. And we wish you, Ronnie,
Refushlema.
and thank you, Les, and go well, and thank you, Steve. It's been a wonderful
Thank
show.
you so much.
And don't forget on Friday morning, talk of the reflections of the past, and have a good evening. Now,
Sorry to hear
Ronnie
about
Mink
that.
has been so ill.
Sorry to hear that.
So ill.
Steve, thanks a million.
Thank you.
It was
Wonderful. Nice to
amazing.
meet you.
I'll
Thank you so much.
get you
It's a
one.
fantastic
As if
book.
I know you. Just yourself.
You hear us in the
You may know his father, Brian Marks,
He had a gym in town.
in Jimington, and then there's his grandfather's. You know his grandfather, of course, if you were Srodin, Bunny Marks, but you wouldn't remember him long before.
Steve and Isaac, thanks a million.
No, I think it was very.